Welcome to the next segment of Tools and Techniques, segment 4. Today we're going to talk about It's Alive, how Vidiots resurrected the Eagle Theater. And we have one presenter here in the room with us and then another presenter joining us by Zoom. So want to thank our official education sponsors this year, Mills and Schnoring Architects. And we would love it if you would help us make sure that we are doing our best to plan these conferences that are worthwhile to you. So fill out that session evaluation on the app after the session today. And you can find written bios about our presenters today in the program book and online. But I will be very happy to introduce our two presenters today. In the room, Scott Norton, who is a historic theater consultant based in Los Angeles, and also from Los Angeles, Maggie McKay, the executive director of the Vidiots Foundation. Let's give both of them a big round of applause.
Thank you. Thank you, and thanks for coming. And Maggie, thank you for being with us remote.
Thank you for allowing me to do this. I'm sorry that I'm not with you in person.
Yeah, we'll get you here. We'll get you here eventually. I'm going to go ahead and basically hand the virtual mic over to Maggie. We're going to start by talking about the history of Vidiots. So thank you all for here, and here's Maggie.
Hi. So thank you, first of all, for having us. So the picture that you're seeing right now are our incredible founders, Kathy Tauber in the red, very 80s shoulder padded blazer, and Patty Pollinger in the white, very shoulder padded blazer. They opened Vidiots in 1985. They're native Angelenos. They wanted to open a small business. They wanted to work for themselves and peel out of male-dominated industries. And their way to do that was to open a video store. And they became quite well-known, internationally recognized, especially for the way that they were curating. You can see some of their early films. A lot of these and still are really rare and hard to find films. They were stocking video art and short films and music videos and things that, quite frankly, no other independent video store in Southern California was stocking at the time. And they also really founded this space out of a desire to create a community hub. And that made them very, very different. And I think that's why we're still around today, is because they knew that very early on, things like holding screenings and creating a space that people wanted to hang out in, not just a transactional space, but really a community-centric brick and mortar that people would come and hang out at, was how they were going to have a successful business. And they were incredibly accurate in that assessment. And so everything you're about to hear and see about our current state and our future is based on that. There's Patty and Kathy and yours truly here at Vidiots before we closed our Santa Monica location. So we lived in Santa Monica from 1985 until 2017. I got involved in 2016 after a long career in film programming, mostly for film festivals. But my area of expertise and my passion is connecting filmmakers and artists with audiences and advocating for audiences, especially in a time of what I think is a real decrease in attention paid to the audience and in accessibility and affordability for film audiences. So this was in our old spot when we were very desperately trying to stay open, which didn't happen, but now we're even bigger and better.
Thank you. So now I'm going to just give you a brief history of the Eagle Theater. This is the theater that I grew up going to as a little kid. So this whole project has been something near and dear to my heart. It opened in 1929 as a vaudeville house named the Yosemite Theater. Vaudeville lasted for a total of 2 days before it became strictly a movie house, and it ran as a movie house for decades. The name was changed to the there we go, grand two-day opening event. The name was changed to the Eagle Theater. This is in the Eagle Rock section of Los Angeles. Eagle Rock is, like I say, it's my hometown, but it's really part of Los Angeles. It thinks it's a small town, but it's a big city. The marquee was changed in the 40s, and it was the only theater in Eagle Rock for decades until it was turned into a church about, Maggie, I think it was about 20 years ago, wasn't it?
It would be about 21 years ago. Yeah, I think the
21
last
years ago.
screenings were in 1999 going into early 2000.
Right. So here it is as a church. It was a video church, so I don't even think there were congregants. I think it was basically uh, the preacher and TV cameras. Uh, it was this is what it looked like for a long time, which for those of us who love going to movies was really depressing. About 5 years ago, a little for lease sign went up, and a friend of mine alerted me, and I contacted the realtor. And he said, "Well, I'm doing a showing on whatever date," and so I showed up. And little did I know, but Maggie also showed up with her team, and we checked out the Eagle Theater. This is what it looked like with the church. They'd built this giant platform. I don't know what they did on it, but built a giant platform. All the details that you can see along the walls were hidden when I was a kid. It was all hidden behind curtains. But originally, those side walls were painted murals. There was sort of a bucolic Spanish garden scene. So it was, I like to call it
I think that's me, Escott, sitting on the floor
there you go.
talking to the realtor.
Didn't even know you at the time. Anyway.
Yeah.
So this is sort of a semi-atmospheric theater. The sky was painted a deep blue, and like I say, these sort of garden scenes between the columns. Long, long before I was born, of course. You can see how deep the stage is. So the rolled up screen there is basically the front of the stage, the proscenium. Not a lot of room, so it would have been very, very small vaudeville acts for those 2 days. And that's when Maggie sort of kicked into gear. She signed the lease, and why don't you go from there?
Sure. So I'll start by saying that Vidiots became a nonprofit organization after decades as one of the most successful small businesses, especially one founded and helmed by women, which are very few in the film industry and just few in general in LA. They, of course, started to hit walls financially when DVR and streaming really started to cut into their business. And so Patty and Kathy very wisely transitioned to a nonprofit model. They had always really had a mission and were really in some ways outside of the tax designation, sort of doing the things that a nonprofit would do for a community. But they made that official in 2012. And again, they had already built a screening room. They had been screening movies and putting together events since 1985. So this sort of new territory as something beyond a video store was very familiar to them. What was different was that we were now supporting the space through fundraising. So in 2017, when we closed, I went under the umbrella of one of our major donors who agreed to pay my salary and to pay the storage fees for our 60,000 titles on DVD and Blu-ray and our neon signs and anything from the store that we knew we wanted to keep, a lot of archival material. And so everything went into storage in 2017. I went to Annapurna, and for the next 2 years, I put together an advisory council, a board of directors, and started to really think of what a business model for a revamped Vidiots could be. That in and of itself is a very long and I think actually interesting story, but I'll spare you those details. By around 2018-19, I had written a complete new business model and a business plan and budgets with a wonderful MBA team out of Austin, who had a lot of cinema operations expertise. And what we knew was what I already knew, but that we had proven out in this new business plan was that we needed to find a gap in the culture in Los Angeles. To me, that was that there were no movie theaters on what we call the east side of LA. While we are based in Eagle Rock, we really serve a very, very large community, especially in Northeast LA. But we have visitors from all over the city. But historically, there have been very few theaters on what we call the east side of LA, which is where many artists, many film industry executives, many of our active members of the film community are actually now living on the east side of LA. When Patty and Kathy opened in the 80s in Santa Monica, that was very much what Santa Monica was. But as we know, neighborhoods radically change. And so we were looking very squarely at the east side of LA. We were looking at any buildings I could build movie theaters in, whatever that meant, whether it was going to be micro cinemas or outdoor cinemas. I knew it needed to be the combination of the video store and a movie theater or multiple movie theaters. And that answer, and by the way, we had very, very little money when we were doing this research. When we signed the lease on the Eagle, which we found as Scott noted, in the spring of 2019, we were really looking at any kind of building that had a high ceiling. But when we found the Eagle, that's when we started fundraising in earnest. And by the time we announced that we had signed the lease, we had just enough to sign that lease. We got very lucky. Our landlords are former Vidiots customers and wanted very much to retain the space as a center for the arts, essentially. They also very much liked the idea that the organization was run by women.
How's that for instance? The building owner is a Vidiots customer, was a past Vidiots customer.
Which was a coincidence, but also tells you a lot about what Vidiots' cultural impact was in LA even before we reopened.
Yeah.
So we got the building, we signed the lease in October of 2019, which was pretty terrible timing for us. But again, great landlords and an incredible support team, our architects, Wick Architecture, and our contractor, a wonderful fellow named Jeff Berkmeyer, who both negotiated the lease with me and then served as our contractor and our developer. And without Jeff, none of this would have happened. But there you can see we were pressing our initials into the concrete when we poured 17 tons to revamp.
We'll have some construction pictures later, because I think one of the really successful things that you did was the social media engagement. The entire construction process, while all of us were, confined to our homes during COVID, and they were building with masks on, we could sort of watch vicariously as they were creating this theater in front of us. It was really exciting.
Yeah.
So this is just another area that you were using as fundraising, and that is the founding members and the regular members. You want to talk about the founding members and this wall?
Sure. So as I said, when we started fundraising, the minute that we got the building, I went to a very small number of people who I had known for a long time and asked them to join as founding members. At that time, we were asking for people to join between 25 and above, or 25 and above. Some people came in at 25, a few people came in less. And so we identified 5,000 as the number that would be what we are calling our founding member donors. And we sort of did that based on some knowledge that I had from actually being on the other side of fundraising at Annapurna, giving money away, and sort of what we thought an average gift would be appropriate to ask for from members of the filmmaking community, which is really what, where we went first. When we got just enough money to sign the lease, we then went public with with the relaunch plans, and it obviously took a very, very long time because COVID hit shortly thereafter. And so during the first few months, we were all in the planning process. We were going through permitting. We were coming up with the designs for the building. The reason why this building really worked for us was not just because it was a movie theater, which created a really wonderful narrative for us, more so than my initial thinking of like going into an auto body shop and building micro cinemas. But the narrative of us bringing back both this beloved, iconic space, Vidiots, and this one-time beloved movie theater in Northeast LA made for a very compelling narrative. That was, of course, greatly impacted once the pandemic hit. The one thing that I can say for it is, as Escott noted, was that we had social media, we had Instagram, and we had our newsletters. We had a very small e-blast list at that time, but we also had a very captive audience of people in LA and around the world who were, one, incredibly bored, two, addicted to their phones, and three, very, very concerned about the state of movie going post-COVID. And that, of course, only increased as movie theaters in Los Angeles started shutting down in radical numbers, and more video stores were shutting down. It got to be a very scary time. And we were very, very lucky that our initial group of founding members really was so devoted and so trusting of our mission that it really became an incredibly grassroots effort. They were telling people, we were telling people, we were doing Zoom calls. We were doing anything we could to keep up momentum. And then we were able to finally start construction. I think it was in the summer of 2020.
Yeah.
Finally started construction.
Before we dive into construction, which
yeah.
this founding wall, I love what it is. When I was a kid, this was an open sort of forecourt, and there's another picture later, and these were the poster cases. So when it was enclosed by the church, and when Vidiots got it, they turned this into the founding member wall. And so instead of poster cases, these are actual VHS tapes that everyone's names are printed on. So it's I think it's sort of ironic and wonderful that it's VHS tapes on a wall that used to be movie posters.
Yeah. And it was really fun. That wall had been covered with a flat wall. There weren't a ton of historic details left for us to work with, but this wall had been covered up with a flat, very weirdly carpeted wall. And the first swing of a hammer went in, and we were like, wait, what's that behind there? And that was how we sort of operated, was anything we discovered, we would keep.
Yeah.
So when we got far enough into construction that we felt we could safely sort of announce a range of opening, which of course was delayed over and over and over again because of COVID, we launched our annual membership, which has been fundamental in allowing us to raise what we needed to finish construction and to get open. And it's a huge revenue stream for us. And these are the different levels and the benefits.
Yeah, and people were buying memberships before they could even go to the theater. So these were all starting to be sold before theaters were even open, and this was even finished.
Yeah. And it was very successful right off the bat. We, of course, assured people that we would, honor their memberships from the time we opened.
So these are just some of the little merchandise things, which is a lot of fun, pins, shirts, all of those things. Sort of concurrently, before Maggie announced to the public, I was at the time the executive director of the LA Historic Theater Foundation, and we called a meeting of the community in the Eagle Rock City Hall. Yes, we still have a city hall, even though we're not a city. And we had a full house in this little meeting, and we talked about possibilities. We went through, we formed little committees, and Maggie is hidden in this room as I remember somewhere.
I'm sitting in the second row next to the person in a green jacket and a pork pie hat, and I was really trying to hide. I really did not want. I wanted to be a fly on the wall and hear what people wanted. And there were some really cockamamie ideas. And then there were some, really passionate, intelligent people who actually one person who's now one of my best friends is actually also in this picture. We did not know each other yet, I believe. But the people who really wanted it to be a cinema again were the ones I was really looking for. And that was what I was really paying attention to.
So now that you have announced the lease, now that you have the public knows about it, and I could step aside as a nonprofit and let you take the reins. You started building your team, including your designers and architects,
Yep.
and your staff. Now, some of these staff came on later. Some of them, like Robbie, instrumental from the very beginning. Do you want to talk about any of your staff, or how important it was to bring them on at an early stage?
Yeah, absolutely. For a long time I was really by myself. I had a wonderful board of directors who were instrumental in certainly in like cheerleading and keeping us going and making introductions. I was the primary fundraiser, I was the project manager on construction, and I was also doing sort of like nomadic programming and online programming and doing anything we could during the pandemic to really keep momentum going. um it was an intense struggle for a very long time. Robbie, who's holding that DVD case in the lower picture, was one of our video store clerks going back to Vidiots. He actually preceded me at Vidiots, and is one of the most astute cinephiles I've ever known. He knows every movie practically in our collection. And my first job when I had to lay everybody off at Vidiots in Santa Monica was to get Robbie enough jobbies to stay in touch with me. And I kept introducing him to people who would hire him for temporary jobs so that I could eventually get him back. But we were doing like online trivia and things like that. And then the second hire was our friend Barbara Twist, who's no longer with Vidiots, but is in a great position at Film Festival Alliance, which just produced a very successful art house Convergence.
A
And
number
she
of
was
people know Barbara
absolutely
here.
instrumental in coming in, and she just dug in to do everything. I was either too overwhelmed or too uneducated to do, like figuring out what donor database we were going to use, figuring out how we were going to run membership. She was instrumental in helping us apply for a loan, and not through a nonprofit lender. Without that loan, we never would have opened ever. So she was doing that. And then shortly thereafter, once we were getting closer on construction and I realized I couldn't maintain everything, including the social media and the email blast, we brought on Sila Reyes, who is our director of marketing and also a programmer on our team. And she was completely transformative. So while a lot of people were pressuring me to say, bring on a director of development or a project manager for the construction, I was talking to a lot of experts who kept saying, Maggie, you're the driving force. You have to raise the money. You're the story. You're the narrator of this thing. You got to stick with that. Ultimately, we made decisions out of sort of like what I thought was like desperation at the time. But in the end, they were very strategic decisions, especially around marketing. You can see these renderings. I love these renderings. We had a lot of photorealistic renderings, like you saw on a slide a couple slides ago. I knew that I could never show photorealistic renderings to a creative community. They would look at it and cringe. And so we invited an artist to take our architectural renderings and put them into something that I thought would allow a potential donor or partner to look at and see as a piece of artwork. I love these renderings. They're almost identical to what we ended up with the exception of all of that neon, which was about $150,000 worth of neon. That plan went away.
But let's say, except for the neon, the top illustration on the left is pretty accurate. And this is the lobby. This was probably the biggest change. This is the lobby I grew up with. So really small. Those are the theater doors on the right and an exit door on the left and a cringy bathroom in the back. That was it. There was a concession stand, but that just made it more crowded.
It wasn't really a lobby. It was like a hallway.
Yeah.
with concessions and a couple of video games in the 80s. But this never would have passed. You could never have opened this space. The original theater, going way back, was 900 seats. It operated at around 800 seats through the 70s and 80s. The church brought it down to 350. And then we brought it down to 270, which was a number I worked very carefully on, talking to just about every studio publicist and every film programmer in LA to get to that number.
So while your seating went down, your lobby went up. We went from this to this for the lobby. So the old wall, the old theater walls where the columns are, and this more than doubled the size, allowed for a bar and a concession stand, separate bar concession stand, and then a wonderful congregating space. Also, 3 ADA bathrooms and stairs up to really nice, not cringy bathrooms at the top. This was what I call the forecourt, which is generous. This was the old exterior. The glass doors weren't there. That was the ticket booth on the left. There was a planter on the right, and this is what it is now. So it's an additional congregating space connected to the lobby. Now a nice bench on the right, and the lobby and the founding wall on the left. These were the old cringy stairs going up to the bathroom, and I love that they left the old patina on the wall, but the stairs are now nice and comfy and carpeted. So here's the fun stuff. Maggie, you want to talk about dealing with LA City?
Sure. Do you mean talk or kvetch?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, one of the interesting things was that when we announced and we started this process, pretty much everybody who was involved, we have a wonderful permitting consultant, a great ABC consultant. We knew that beer and wine absolutely had to be part of the revenue stream. There would have been no way for us to open this without that as a revenue stream. Additionally, Eagle Rock, as wonderful as it is very set in its ways, and I think did itself a terrible disservice over the last 20 years. It only recently changed in wanting to keep a quiet, sort of vibe, which really killed small businesses and made it very difficult for new businesses to open because the closing hours are 10 p.m. So no restaurant, no bar, and certainly not a movie theater can really operate within those hours. So when we went to the city, we were not just requesting permits to sell beer and wine. We were also working very hard to establish hours that were sensible and would be sustainable for a movie theater. We were expecting a very easy time. We were told we were going to have a very easy time by every expert under the sun. The community was so engaged by the time we were starting to get to our permitting. That was one of the things the pandemic did do for us, was that it gave us so much time to get to know our community, so much time to rally people. And then we were very sadly shocked when we had our first hearing and encountered a gentleman who does not even live in our neighborhood, but whose daughter owns a piece of property around the corner from us. And he was an out-of-work lawyer who had never passed the bar in LA and was sort of, he sues for sport. And he came after us, and we had some really bad luck. We got an initial zoning administrator who I think was actually biased against us because everybody in our team was at the time were women. And he sort of allowed this gentleman to really kind of harass us on our first call. And he did not give us any kind of favorable operating conditions. He was wrong. He did things like go outside of precedent and saddle us with 52 parking spots, which was unprecedented and actually against code. So we ended up in a very, very long battle. Both then that zoning administrator retired. There, it got all reversed in a secondary hearing, and it was great, and we were all ecstatic. But then this gentleman sued the city of Los Angeles with Vidiots as a named partner based on a loophole in something that the zoning administrator did wrong in their paperwork, or that the committee had done wrong in their paperwork. So it actually had nothing to do with us or with the operating conditions or with feedback from the community. It was simply bad luck. It was simply a case of, a NIMBY, and unfortunately a system in Los Angeles that really, really favors the residential community, and not, but one person in the residential community can basically take down an entire business.
Gives a lot of power to a single voice, even though we had hundreds of other supporters. This is, I forget how many hearings you ended up having to go through.
Five hearings. This was the last one.
Yeah, this is one of the hearings that got great public support, and this is the only picture I had, but there was a lot of online support and public support for all the hearings, and one negative voice.
Yeah. We also really had bad luck in that our two back to back our council members are very pivotal when you're going through a permitting process like this. Our first council person went to prison he was indicted on some very serious charges and was completely inaccessible while we were going through the early stages of our permitting process. And then our second council person, who's still in office, was embroiled in his own controversies and had inherited a pretty angry constituency that was fairly anti-small business. We were very, very lucky that our neighborhood council and an organization called the Eagle Rock Association, which is also a nonprofit, just populated with the most incredible people in Eagle Rock. Between those two groups and groups like the Historic Theater Foundation, and then a lot of our neighbors and friends who just were so wedded to the idea of Vidiots opening, they just stuck with us. And then eventually on that last hearing, we were successful. But it was a major task for us. We were lucky. We had some pro bono legal help, but it cost thousands and thousands of dollars unnecessarily allocated to that part of the project. And it's something that I very much hope changes in the future.
Yeah, we have a broken system.
Yeah.
What we do have in the Northeast area is some very supportive neighborhood organizations. They are within a half a mile of Occidental College, which is a liberal arts college that dates back to the to the teens. I'm a third generation Oxy family. So they have a division called Oxy Arts, and you collaborated with Oxy Arts. You also collaborated with Bob Baker Marionette Theater, which is another historic theater that had just acquired a nearby a nearby historic theater, maybe about a mile away. So there was a lot of wonderful interaction between these neighborhood organizations, and then the advocacy groups. You mentioned before the Theater Foundation, which I was executive director of for a while, and TERA, which is the Eagle Rock Association, a neighborhood advocacy group that was really instrumental and really sort of kicked that ball forward for you. And they got their members behind the hearings, and TERA was super helpful.
I mean, we just really would not have ever opened without TERA.
I mean, I feel like the lesson here is when you're starting out a theater, when you need to grow a theater, to network with those neighborhood groups and chambers of commerce, any of these neighborhood groups, because once your voice is bigger when you have these groups behind you, right?
Yeah.
Righty. I'm gonna start kicking it into social engagement. So everything's closed, everyone's stuck in their houses. You used your windows as advertising. Originally, it said coming 2020. That number
God.
changed as time went on. Luckily, paint's erasable, so they changed the signs. And then you had a lot of online engagement. I think absolutely brilliant. Not only sort of the regular posts, you did these things where people were telling their stories of the Eagle Theater, sharing memories. It shows how strong the community is. You grew from 10 10,000 followers before, I guess this was before the Eagle Theater announcement. And then at one point it's 50K, and you say you're now at what?
This 10K was actually around when we announced the Eagle, because it says relaunching there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Now we're at about 110, maybe 107,000 followers. That right there under the 50K sign is our marketing director, Sile Reyes. She was a kid of Vidiots. She grew up going to Vidiots. And I had done a very good job for a Gen Xer who hates social media and hates technology. I had actually done a very good job of keeping our Instagram, really like developing our Instagram as the way that people could follow our story and engage with us. We were also lucky that we had some higher profile donors. Most of our high profile donors in the very beginning were also Gen Xers who hate social media, but there were a few of them who were active, and that really helped. When Aubrey Plaza came in as a donor, and then took a picture of herself with her Vidiot stickers and then posted it, it really made an impact on our following. And I love these pictures. These are our online trivia. We'd had a movie trivia night that was very popular in Santa Monica, and we transferred it over to Zoom when the pandemic hit. And it kept us alive, like,
Yeah.
emotionally.
You were engaged, you were building community, even though no one was in the same room together. Really
Correct.
successful following. And now we get into the construction. And
Yep.
these are just some of the social media posts that some of us were living for as we were watching you grow. You were lucky. I mean, I was lucky enough that you gave me some construction tours, but most people were just following online, and really fun. I don't know. I think construction's fun, but the way you presented it on social media, I think everyone sort of got into the process, even though there were some challenges. You want to talk about any of the construction challenges?
Oh, what challenges did we not face? I mean, actually, truthfully, most of the challenges that we hit were city related. So the LADWP, we discovered they kicked back all of our permits to put in basically a fire safety system because of a water pipe we needed for the sprinkler system. This building had no fire safety, no ADA accessibility, no technology. It was a shell basically when we got it. With the exception of the ceiling in this room and the walls in this room, every other part of the building, including the storefront, which I started to say earlier, the storefront was pivotal for us. We would never have just opened a movie theater. The only reason why we took the building was because it had that storefront, and that's where the video store could live, and where I knew I could create an additional revenue stream by building a micro cinema, a flexible community space with a micro cinema,
which I will show you later.
Yeah,
I will show that later, because that is pivotal. Absolutely.
Right. But basically outside of that room, we took it down to the studs. We replaced almost all of the plumbing, every single bit of the electrical.
Yeah.
And so the money was the big thing. We got hit with, all of the overages because of COVID were so intense. But our team really stuck with it, and we were very unified in the vision for the space. And we were very unified in making sure that it opened.
So this
the marquee is all Escott.
This is a fun little thing for me. So we had this horrible marquee that was put in Uh, at one point, I don't know who knows of Pussycat Theaters, but this was a X-rated movie chain in Los Angeles. They acquired the Eagle Theater and because of community outrage. No X-rated movies were actually shown here, but they put up a typical Pussycat marquee, and that's what was there with the church's Jesus Christ, Lord, we'll save you things all over the place. I hated it. And I think,
Everybody hated it.
yeah, most everyone hated it. So I offered to do a design, just a temporary, because eventually we want to raise the money and do a real nice, neon marquee. But I convinced them to let me do a design that brought back the eagle on a temporary basis. So it's mostly, oh, yeah. I found an original piece of plaster detail behind the marquee that has been invisible for decades. So once I climbed up on a ladder, I thought, oh, this is so cool. So eventually it'll be visible. But we basically put in some Vidiots colors, brightened the thing up, cleaned it up, used vinyl, printed vinyl to add the text. So again, all temporary, but it brightened it up a lot. They were very lucky to find bags and bags of snap-lock letters in the attic of the theater that the church had luckily not thrown away. So we actually made new letter boards, and they can use all of the existing letters, which is super lucky. This is my little team of volunteers that we built this thing with, and of course, this was also a social media, um, tool. So while we were doing it, it was getting noticed by neighbors, and then once it was finished, it became a spot for selfies. Um, an unknown band called Talking Heads is down there at the right. That was an amazing evening where they came for a re-release of Stop Making Sense, actual Talking Heads in Eagle Rock. So it became a great location for selfies and advertisements. So now we're switching around. We're going to talk about the grand opening. You got a huge amount of great publicity. You
Yeah,
want to
we
mention?
did.
Yeah, I mean, it was national. There was national coverage, which was super exciting to see Eagle Rock in the national press.
Yep.
Um, and that brings us now I'm trying to sort of keep moving here. Um, Now talking about building the audience, the uh, the theater's been a real success. That you're selling out multiple nights a week, and it's not all just due to social media. What you've created is an environment where people are really enjoying coming and bringing their friends and engaging with each other after the movie. You've had a number of great guests that have done Q&As after the show. And sometimes like this is Phantom of the Paradise that I was at. We knew Paul Williams was going to be there. It turns out other crew members were in the audience, so they were being brought up. We ended up having five people who worked on the movie sitting up there doing a Q&A. It was a really wonderful experience, and that just makes people engaged. One of the other screenings I went to was Groundhog Day. We've all seen that movie a million times, and as you're doing the announcement, Maggie, someone raised their hand and said, "Yeah, my friend was in it, and she's right here."
Yeah.
And it was the girl who is kicked out of her piano lesson. If you remember that in the movie, it's like a 3-second scene, and she doesn't even speak a word. She was in the audience, and the audience just roared with applause when her scene came up. And then at the end, you guys presented her with flowers. It was also her birthday.
Yeah.
All these things make the experience of coming to the Eagle Theater really, really special. You've had a
Yeah.
number of celebrities, which these are just some of the pictures, and I love that you've branded it so that when you present the social media with these celebrities, LeVar Burton, Joe Dante, Danny DeVito, that they're under your old neon sign.
Yeah. Yeah. We have been very lucky. I mean, we have the advantage of living in LA and being in LA. I think a lot of people see these pictures and think like, oh my God, they must have a publicist. We do not have a publicist. We have a pro bono publicist who helps us sometimes, but we are not reaching out to publicists. We're not orchestrating these things in the most obvious of ways. A lot of this is really organic. Some of it does come through studios. We're again being one of the very few spaces in our neighborhood as a venue for studios to host tastemaker events. We're very popular because again, they're able to reach an audience that they can't reach anywhere else. Our pricing for tastemaker and private events is very fair. And we keep our ticket prices very low. We try to keep as many things open to the public and to our members as possible. We have been very lucky to have an organic pathway to a lot of the people you're seeing on the screen. So, you know, for instance, Cord Jefferson, who won the Academy Award for American Fiction this year, or last year, came in for a tastemaker screening, fell in love with the theater, mentioned in his Q&A that he was a big fan of Robert Townsend. Hollywood Shuffle is one of my favorite movies. I've wanted to play it since we opened, but I didn't want to do it without Robert Townsend. He's a living legend. I had no idea how to get to him. I didn't know that I could just go to his website and send him an email. So we kind of sat on that movie for a long time. When Cord mentioned that he wanted to do that, we said maybe your publicist can reach out. At the same time, we discovered that a friend of ours and a regular customer to Vidiots, has a longtime friend of Robert's, he's still a composer. He was a composer for Charles Burnett and for Robert. He said, oh yeah, let me get you his phone number. So organically, we ended up having a screening of Hollywood Shuffle where Cord sat down and had a conversation with Robert after the film. We also had a wedding proposal in that screening that was sanctioned by the two gentlemen in the picture. So we've been really lucky in that way. Again, we've really found ways to connect with the community in ways that are very organic. The video store is a very, very important part of this. Ethan Hawke hung out for hours and hours very much because of the video store. It's a really safe space and a really enlightening space if you haven't been in one for a long time. There's Bernie, not actually in the video store.
And finally, you have a way. Those of us who are now comfortable with streaming, we forget that that those are very curated choices. And if you want to see a movie and you go to all the streaming services, which I'm afraid I pay money for, and you can't find a movie, that's it. You can go on Amazon and buy it, or if you're in Eagle Rock, you can go to Vidiots. With their now 70,000 titles, right?
Yeah. We're at 72 now. Okay. I was just told. That's the previous iteration of the video store space.
So this was the space, the retail space along the side of the building. Had been broken up at one point. It was an ice cream parlor. The last use of this space was a ballroom dancing school. And this is what it looked like when Vidiots came in first. And this is what it looks like now with all of their tapes. This is a fun, if you don't have a video store in your neighborhood, I forgot how fun it is to just browse and to talk to other people who are standing there looking at movies and loving movies. You don't have to have a wonderful person like Robbie who knows all the movies. Just looking at the shelf is an experience. So talk to us about the interaction between the video store and how does the video store support the theater? How does this theater support the video store?
Right. Good question. I mean, I think one, I can tell you neither of them would exist without the other. So to renovate the Eagle, to bring attention to the Eagle, to raise money for the Eagle, we had to have the video store. Vidiots, again, is a beloved brand in LA. It's a logo that just is one of the best logos in logo history. It screams, fun to people. At the same time, the video store could never sustain on its own. And so one thing that was always very front and center for us was that we needed the two to really engage with each other, to never have the video store feel like it was like this kind of kitschy add-on to what was happening in the movie theater. to be able to use it both for marketing, and then also to really use the story of streaming, of the pandemic, of a very serious loss for audiences in video stores going away. We needed to use that as part of our narrative, and it has worked. We've rented, I think almost, how many now? I think we've rented almost like 50 to 60,000 titles out of the video store in less than a year, or in a year. The video store is always active. It also was one of the things that I really needed to do when we were putting our plans together was to figure out how to create sustainability for both the video store and a movie theater, and generally sustainability for an art space. And what I was thinking very carefully about was, how do you get people to stick around and spend money, considering that our prices are really affordable? And one of the ways that we did that was to think, okay, well, if the video store is open all the time, pretty much we're open, from 11 a.m. until 10 p.m. most days, or, noon to 10 p.m. most days. And what can you do when you're in a video store? You're not going to spend a whole heap of money. You can sell people merch, which is a great revenue stream, especially when you have a logo like ours. You can also encourage them to go to the bar and buy a beer and get a popcorn. We sell candy on the counter. What it does is create a sort of very special social gathering space that doesn't require the same commitment for someone as a movie does. So what I really wanted to focus on was how to appeal to someone like a mom or a dad or a babysitter or a caretaker who on a Friday is exhausted and doesn't want to do another round of the playground after a week of school or preschool. And they know they can come to Vidiots, let their kids burn off some steam. You don't have to be quiet like you would in a library. You can pick things up, you can look at them. And then, the grownups can go get a glass of beer or wine, browse, run into neighbors, run into friends, have a chat with a clerk, get some movies and go home. So even if people are not necessarily actively renting, it's a social space that people want to go into. And when they're in there, they're very likely to buy a beer or a glass of wine or a bag of popcorn. And so it creates a very dependable revenue stream, even though the video store is not making tons of money because we keep our pricing competitive with streaming. It is actively in use. And by the same token, ticket sales and private events and tastemaker screenings with studios are so pivotal to keeping the doors on the video store open.
So it's not visible in any of my pictures, but this is all connected. You can walk into the video store, through that door, into the air conditioning, go down a hallway, past the micro cinema, which we'll talk about in a second, and you're right into the Eagle Theater lobby. And that's where the bar and the concession stand is. You can walk through the theater doors into the theater lobby, go down the hallway, which is now decorated with a whole bunch of memorabilia, and you're in the video store. So it's all one piece. And it does make it a very inviting. I personally do spend time picking up a handful of movies and going and getting some very affordably priced popcorn, by the way.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah. That was something we really focused on because the storefronts were two separate storefronts and they weren't really connected to the theater when we inherited the building. So one thing that was really important was that all of our teams were very unified in what the plan for this physical space was and the renovation was. And that was all based on sustainability. That was our driving factor, was sustainability. How do we make this a place that has very diverse revenue streams? How can we make it a place that people don't want to leave? And we really, that was the work that I did with our architects and our contractors.
Yeah, and you've done it.
Yeah,
so these are some of the revenue sources. Anyone who's running a theater already knows the bar is super important, and you've created that bar, but you've also created a place that people want to hang. The concession stand, again, 4 times as big as the one that was there when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Um,
And it could still be bigger, and I wish that it was.
yeah. This is the retail space that was turned into the micro cinema, which I think they very cleverly did by making a removable wall so that the wall on the left can all slide, and it can be an open space, so it can be used for a reception. It can be used as a green room. It's a really flexible space, but it's also soundproofed, so it can be a second screen. This is what it looks like when it's closed up. You've
And
got
that's been
digital.
really lucrative for us. We keep the pricing really low in there. It's got beautiful projection and sound. The seating is what it is. It's very movable. You know, it's a, you know, if you're really fussy, your bum can get a little tired if you're, you know, in a 4-hour movie. But people really love this room because we do a lot of carryovers of new movies in this room. The big house is primarily repertory programming, and then tastemaker one-off screenings of new movies. But again, looking at the gap in the culture and the gap in our location and in our region, we don't have a lot of movies that are showing independent, international, sort of off of the mainstream new movies. And so when movies don't have a traditional distribution model, or they do, but they've kind of cycled out of the first run movie theaters, our head of programming, Amanda Salazar, will take a look and see, like, what do we think people want to see? And so something like Challengers, we just had a very successful run of. It's $20 to stream Challengers, and it's way better looking and sounding in a movie theater and way more fun to watch with an audience. So we put it in the micro for a week and see how it does. Sometimes we carry them over another week.
And this is the main theater. You do rent this out. Even though this may not be as applicable to people who aren't in LA, describe what a tastemaker screening is, because
Sure.
there may be places for it in other communities. But what do you mean by that?
So in LA, I hate the word tastemaker. I think it's kind of gross. We used to call these word of mouth screenings. But essentially, a studio has a new movie coming out. They need to, I think about it like crowdfunding. When you're crowdfunding, the advice that everybody gives you is you have to have a certain percentage of your financial goals secured through people you know are going to give you that money before you even announce a crowdfunding campaign. You know, with movie releases the way they are right now, you want to have a guaranteed lock on a certain number of people who have seen the movie, who are going to actively go out and talk, hopefully positively, about that movie before the film opens. So especially when you're in LA, New York, San Francisco, cities that have people who are active members of the film community, maybe who are a little more high profile, they have large social followings. Studios will pay us to host a screening for our members, so that the hope is that they then go out and tweet, or they Instagram, or they just talk in general about those movies. We've done very successful tastemaker screenings of movies like American Fiction, Killers of the Flower Moon. I mean, from really big titles that did Academy runs to smaller titles. We had a great television series with IndieWire, where we did screenings of Abbott Elementary and had Quinta Brunson in for a Q&A. So these are screenings that are great for us because they're both open and accessible to our members. They're always free, and so that they don't disrupt box office. But they're also something that we're getting paid directly for. So it takes a little bit of pressure off of our programming team. We do have a lot of sellouts on our regular programs, but not every single screening is a winner. And although I do think they're all winners, because even if we have a crowd of 30 people show up, they will always have a good time. They're always left they always leave Vidiots feeling, richer for the experience.
Speaking of rich, how's that how's that for a segue? Uh, not only did you open with digital, but now you have 35 in the main house, which is really lovely, and I've seen both. And you have a amazing technical director that is keeping all of this working really well, and is a pleasant person. So I
Yes.
just want to nod to that. The theatrical experience. I talked a little bit about this earlier, and I just want to say that the engagement that you have with every movie being introduced by someone who either is one of your key staff members or something, you're always asking if it's the first time you're seeing the movie, if it's the first time you've been in Vidiots. In Eagle, the engagement is really a positive thing and fully enjoyable. This is the lobby after I forget which movie, but I took this because I just loved you have a whole bunch of people talking to each other, strangers, friends, about what they just saw. And the moments in that lobby are so special. That's why you leave your living room. That's why you're not watching movies on a phone, is because you're sharing the experience with other people. Um, okay, we're going to try to wrap it up, but what I wanted you to talk about, Maggie, is your thoughts on an initiative to bring this kind of a model to other theaters. You want to talk about that?
Sure. The long-term goal for Vidiots, which now I'm trying to fast track because we're getting so many requests. But the long-term goal has always been that once we were open and running and thriving and financially sustainable, that we will start a separate fund under the Vidiots umbrella. We're very casually calling this the Vidiots Fast Forward Project, that will provide both seed funding and advisory support for anyone, whether it's an existing video store operator or an operator that of a theater that wants to include a physical media collection, or a struggling theater or a struggling video store. The idea is to provide some seed funding, which was nearly impossible for me to find. Through our entire process, we've only received 2 grants through like true foundations. Some people, like a private foundation might, a family foundation might call it a grant, but truthfully, we've had funding from the National Association of Theater Operators and from the Golden Globe Foundation. We've been rejected from many other like formal grant operations, mostly because we're out of the box, and because we don't have a long track record with this model, in spite of like being around since 1985 and having done all this miraculous work. We don't have 10 years of financials with this model. We've also found that so many of the really revered grant givers are very much based on connections, which I didn't really have. So what I've always wanted to do is really provide some support for other people like me to be able to do that work, and especially around physical media. And since we've opened, we have 3 potential partners right now we're talking to, that are existing theaters or film spaces that want to incorporate a physical media video store type model into their existing spaces. We're talking to another group that just wants to open a video store, and new video stores, by the way, are opening. And no, it's hard to believe, but it's happening. So that's a long-term goal. It's going to be a big raise to do that. We're also actively fundraising to support a very, very, very long-term digitization project on our rare VHS. We have 11,000 rare VHS tapes that we need to digitize and preserve. Many of them are really the only copies of that work that we're aware of. And certainly we're the only ones who have the ability to make them accessible to the public again. So those are some of the long-term goals for Vidiots.
Thank you. So I think we've allowed just a few minutes for question and answers. So does anyone have any questions for Maggie? Anyone at all? Either about, oh yes. Okay, I'm going to repeat that for the recording. The merchandise, what kinds of things do you do and what is your best seller?
Oh, that's such a good question. I think that t-shirts are our best sellers. And by the way, nobody should overlook merch. Merch kept us alive during the pandemic. I always try to work with locals. I try to work with small business owners and legacy business owners and women and people of color who are, doing work like we are. So we work with a small operation. We were also really lucky. We have a sock manufacturer called Gumball Poodle. We do real well with socks. But during the pandemic, I was like taking the orders myself and then hand delivering to people. I didn't care where they were. But it really kept us alive. And then we were also giving away a fair amount of merch. So when Danny DeVito or LeVar Burton or Melanie Griffith comes to Vidiots, we always make sure they leave with a pin or a sticker or something, because it's like free marketing. It's great. Merch is great.
Yeah. Anyone else? All right. Well, oh, yes. Not at all. She's asking if she's on a board of directors, and if you have a board of directors, and I know you do, as well as an advisory board. Do you want to talk about your makeup of your board?
Yeah. So we do have a board of directors. I came to Vidiots when it had already become a nonprofit. So we had a board of directors. They were a fledgling board made up mostly of friends of our founders and people who, like, former clerks, people who really loved Vidiots and wanted it to survive. I sort of refashioned the board when I got involved and rebuilt it with an eye towards fundraising and sort of connectivity to the film industry. Our board is really great. We are an inexperienced board. None of us, one or two people have had some board experience. Now they've had a lot more. We don't operate as traditionally as other boards do, meaning, like, we don't always stick to our term limits, and it's, we add board members very slowly. But our board members are the best thing about our board members is that it's like the most amazing cheerleading squad ever. I never would have been able to emotionally keep going through the pandemic without them. And they've been really key to connecting me and Vidiots to donors and advisors. So our advisory council, we created an advisory council because we had all of these experts in different fields. And all of these people who really wanted to be involved with Vidiots, but they couldn't afford to give get. We have a very low give get for an organization that's LA based. It's like $2,500. That's either you donate $2,500 or you help procure $2,500 by either bringing in a service that would be worth $2,500 or bringing in a donor at $2,500. We were not religious about it during the pandemic. We sort of put it aside during the pandemic. But what we really needed early on was expertise. People like Escott. And I mean, I think a lot of it has to do with personality and how you vibe with people. But I'm a connector. I've always been a connector, and I have been in LA for a very long time and am a known quantity in the independent film world. So I had this group of people who wanted to help and didn't know how. And so I created this advisory council. As far as makeup of our board, we've got a marketing expert. We've got film producers who are our connectors to potential donors. We have an events expert. We're missing a lawyer, but I have a pro bono lawyer on our advisory council. We've got our founders are on our board. And what I'm looking for now is to add a lawyer to our board and to add a grant expert to our board. We'll do that relatively slowly, but those are all areas of expertise that boards really need and that I'm working on myself.
You can actually, if you go to vidiotsfoundation.org, The board and the advisory board, they're listed on the website. We only have like 2 more minutes, so is there anything else? Okay, yes, a question in the back. It is across the country, but I'll let her give you the deal. The program to help video stores and theaters, is that across the country? Can you tell a
Absolutely.
little bit more? And how would someone contact you if they're interested in talking to you more about it?
You can email me at maggie@vidiotsfoundation.org. I will forewarn you, we have no funding for this yet. So the seed part of the project is not there yet. But the advisory support is there. And we are we have a couple of fledgling they're like pilot projects that we're working with. And then the idea is to use those pilots to then show that we can do this. And then go take that information out and try to seek some funding for it. We're actually specifically looking for organizations that are outside of the traditional sort of film industry cities. We're also really looking at areas that have what we call cinema deserts. So if you're in a town or a city that is noticing, wow, we have no video stores left. Maybe we have one multiplex movie theater, but we don't have an independent cinema. We're definitely looking at that. Or if you're an existing movie theater and you're like, we have a storefront and we're not doing much with it. Those are the kinds of spaces that we're looking at right now. It's just email us. Hopefully the program will be really well funded and then get so popular that we'll have an application process, but we're not there yet with it.
So unless there's another question, I just want to end it with talking about Vidiots' growth in 1 year. You opened in June of 2023, and within a week, you had rented a ridiculous amount of videos. And now a year later, just over a year later, where are you as far as your success? What has changed staffing wise, financially? Because it's pretty impressive to me.
Thank you. I'm so proud of it. We started with a skeleton staff. I was my best friend and I, who sadly passed on, but we were scooping popcorn in the first couple weeks. I was hauling trash. We were a really skeleton team. We were doing whatever it was taking to keep the doors open. We got really lucky that some really great people wanted to work with us. Our technical director, Boris Ibanya, as you mentioned. We had a marketing director. In less than 6 months, we were able to pay off a $500,000 loan. We were able to provide our full-time staff with healthcare benefits. We have been able to start saving a sort of a reserve. We opened with a lot of things that were sort of unfinished. The building looked great and the sound and the projection were great, but in a lot of ways we were we were lacking in some things that were not obvious to the public. But we were able to do things like tint our windows so our video store staff was not going blind towards the end of the day because the sun was blasting in their faces. We were able to make a better staff break room. We've been able to allocate resources to raises, and that was always my plan. My plan was to get open, pay the loan off was the first priority. The second priority was to give a round of raises. And the third priority was to get those healthcare benefits. And then after that, it's take care of the staff, keep people happy, keep them safe, keep them going. And then, slowly start to expand the staff, which we've been able to do. So we've since brought on a lot of support staff that we just simply did not have when we opened. We've brought on a director of programming. So a friend of mine, this best friend of mine, was booking movies, but he was very part-time and not really functioning as a director of programming. Now we have a director of programming. And again, support staff has been really key. So we've been able to do all of those things in a year, and bring on more staff for the video store. And then the next set of goals is to expand programming, to bring on an education director.
And
to
the
bring on a
marquee,
grant
and the
writer.
marquee. Don't forget the marquee.
And the marquee.
Yeah, we got to do the marquee. Okay,
And
that's
the
it.
marquee.
We're out of town. We're out of town. We're out of time. Thank you all for coming. Thank you, Maggie, for being here.
Absolutely. I'm so glad to do it. And I just want to give a shout to Escott. Without Escott, oh, this might not have ever been possible. Escott is one of those people, if anybody's trying to do a project this ambitious, you have to surround yourself with people who have unending positivity and belief in the thing. And then expertise, and Escott has been that and much, much more. So, and a trusted advisor and friend through this whole process. So thank you, Escott.
Thank you. All right. Take care, everyone.
Bye.